Welcome, guys, to my explanation of three really big mistakes that Napoleon makes. Okay, so here's Napoleon here. And I'm not sure if you can tell, but this over here is supposed to be Napoleon. And this is a guy named Duke Wellington that represents the British. And during this time period, the British are very, very powerful. And Napoleon wants to gain some power. Napoleon's mistake number one. So, in an attempt to become more powerful than the British, who, by the way, had the biggest, most powerful navy in the world at the time, Napoleon decided to put on a naval blockade. He put a naval blockade around all of the countries that he controlled and tried to keep the British out and tried to keep them from being able to sell to any of the countries that he controlled. And he thought that that would allow him to make a lot of money, and it would also make the British less powerful. But it backfired because the British have the strongest navy in the world. So the British pushed their way through the blockade. People cheated because guess what? Some of what Napoleon controlled had gaps. And so look right here. Portugal wasn't controlled by Napoleon, and so the British goods came in through the places that he didn't have control over. So the blockade ended up being a big failure for Napoleon and weakened him because this cost a lot of money and took a lot of manpower, and it didn't work. The second big mistake that Napoleon made was he went to war with a friend to get to an enemy. So here's what I mean by that. If you look at this map, Napoleon's here in France. His friend, the Spanish, are his friends. All this lavender-ish territory are allies with the French. But France, Napoleon, is mad at Portugal, way over here. And the only way he felt for him to get to Portugal was to march right through Spain. So Napoleon took 300,000 men from France, 300,000 soldiers, and marched his way through Spain to fight in Portugal. But Spain didn't like that. Nobody wants 300,000 soldiers marching through their territory, taking their livestock and eating their grain and setting up camps along the way. So the Spanish got mad and they fought him too. This meant that by the time Napoleon's forces got all the way through here, fought and gained control of Portugal, and went back, he had lost 300,000 men. Napoleon thought this was going to take 20 days, and instead it took more than 2 years. So the second big mistake was the Peninsula War that cost him 300,000 men. The third big mistake that Napoleon made was that he decided he was going to go and try to conquer Russia. But Russia is huge and it's vast and it's cold in the winter. So Napoleon gets an army of 600,000 people. Some say 600,000 people. And he marches into Russia. But he gets into Russia and wins a couple of battles, but then really waits around in a place called Moscow, which was the capital city of Russia. He waits around there too long, and winter starts to set in. By the time he turned back, he was trudging through Russia. This is Tsar Alexander, the leader of Russia at the time. He was trudging through Russia in the snow. And on the way out, his men are freezing to death and starving to death. And so he starts with 600,000 men, maybe, and comes out with maybe 10,000. So those are Napoleon's three big mistakes because he loses a lot of money in the blockade that doesn't go well. He loses 300,000 men in the Peninsula War that doesn't go well. And then in Russia, he probably loses 500,000 men. And that leads to Napoleon losing power.